Pushkin.
Hey everyone, today we have Sharon Van Etten on the show, the singer-songwriter who Pitchfork recently crowned an indie rock institution. Van Etten was discovered in the early aughts after performing at open mics in Manhattan's Lower East Side. Her 2009 debut album, Because I Was in Love, was written as a way to process surviving a violent crime and an abusive relationship in her 20s. Over the next few years, Sharon continued her journey in music, releasing albums and touring internationally until on a whim around 2015, she auditioned for the Netflix show The OA, landing a major role despite having no previous acting experience. In May, Van Etten released her critically acclaimed sixth album, We've Been Going About This All Wrong. In my opinion, it's her best. It's an album dedicated to the collective trauma amassed in the lead up to the pandemic and beyond. On today's episode, Broken Record producer Leah Rose talks to Sharon Van Etten about some of those pandemic issues, like recording her new album in her LA-based home studio during lockdown while attempting to balance domestic life. Sharon also explains how her inner Jersey girl comes out on stage and why wearing leather pants and heels on stage post-pandemic feels so daunting. This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond. Here's Leah Rose with Sharon Van Etten.
Your new album, it's a pandemic album, but it's also a forced domesticity album. You recorded it at home. You have a studio at home. But that must have been a completely different experience on top of the pandemic, on top of, what was going on politically, on top of wildfires, on top of being a mom, a partner. How did the situation at home influence the recording?
Well, as a mom, you know that you find the moments you can to make shit happen,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have 30 minutes to make some magic. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do the best that I can. And you set realistic goals for yourself. And when you have to be able to ask permission when you really need to be the one that works more than the other. Like, today's the day I really need to be in there. I'm hitting a stride here. And my partner has pretty set hours in his day, meetings, Zoom. And in New York, I didn't have a dedicated studio for myself. So in that way, it was for the better. It was in my garage going through in my backyard. So I was able to, most of the time, if I needed to go in there, I could. If I needed to put my kid on the TV in order for myself to work for an extra hour, I would. Most of the time he was outside skating, and on early demos, you can probably hear him in the yard. And there was a window from my studio looking out so I could see him going back and forth. And sometimes he would sit in there with me if I was just working on lyrics, and he would play the drums. And, other times I could just be reading to disconnect from an emotional place that took me too far. And we'd be hanging out in the living room just like talking and reading. But you just find whatever moments of inspiration you need,
Do lyrics or do melodies come to you sort of like a flash of lightning? Like you have to go in and capture it? Or is it something you can just sort of work up and start with more vowel sounds or guttural sounds and it turns into something?
I mean, most of the time melodies come as soon as I sit down to something, whether it be piano, guitar. Lyrics come way later. But I tend to sit down and create a chord progression and a melody. And once I get from point A and point B, maybe there's a C. I don't always believe in the C. But I think if I find something interesting that can at least go to those places, I'll hit record and just let myself sing stream of consciously for about 10, 15 minutes. And I'll let myself wander melodically and see what it is that I find. And most of the time, I just hit stop and I move on to the next thing. And I don't think about that too much. And I see if I can find another melodic idea on a different instrument. Sometimes 2 or 3 of those ideas in the same day end up being married later on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're 3 different songs. Sometimes it's 3 pieces of garbage. But on moments where I can't even play an instrument and hear a melody, I go back to those songs and I listen back and pull out words and phrases and try to remember what it was I was going through. And then I'll shape words around them. On the rare occasion, the words just come out. Like the song Darkish came out in one sitting. And I let it live on its own. There's no like verse chorus situation. I don't know what that is. But it's like one solid piece. And I don't know where it came from, but it just came out of thin air.
What point in the pandemic did that come?
That one was probably the only one that was fully realized before the album. But I didn't want to put it on my last record because I thought it was too apocalyptic, and it was on a demo on my phone, and you could hear the birds chirping through the windows. And I saved it, and I put it in this folder because I thought it was just too dark for the context of the songs. And then the song kept coming up in the demos that I wanted to work on. And, I ended up re-recording that one in the studio. But the one thing I didn't want to lose was the birds, because there was this point in LA when people stopped driving and the sky turned blue and so many birds started coming out. And in the midst of what I thought was the end of the world, nature was coming back, and it gave me this moment. I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but in the midst of all this chaos and these fires and the earthquakes, I heard the birds, and it made me remember this demo. And I thought, with how intense all my other songs are, this song now feels light.
Wow.
And I don't want to build it up. And I want this one song to live on its own without any production. And I knew that before I even built up the other songs. But I knew the other songs were going to go there. But that was the one where I just felt like, okay, this is where everyone can kind of take a deep breath.
I read an old Time Out interview that you did in 2016, and you said, I'm not a down in the dumps person. People think that I am because of the music that I write. Is that something that you feel compelled to tell people because your music is so emotional?
Well, I definitely like reassuring people that I'm okay, number one, especially my mother, who at various points in my life was like, I thought you were okay. I thought I thought you were in a good place. I'm like, well, I am, but like, this is my coping mechanism. This is my form of therapy. And if I didn't have music, I don't know where I'd be today. But I do have that outlet, and I think that if you have an outlet, whatever it is, whether it be music or exercising or painting, it's like everyone needs to find their outlet to let out the side of them that is hard to communicate. And that's how I process my emotions.
Yeah. So how do records usually start for you? Like, do you isolate certain sounds or feelings that you want to capture? Or is it more just you like noodling on an instrument or writing lyrics? How do they usually begin?
Well, I tend to write and write and write and not think about the production part of it at first. And then when I have a collection of songs and I look at the entirety of what they are and what I'm talking about and what I'm going through in that moment, then I realize that I'm capturing a time period and it feels like a chapter. And this particular chapter, I had about 20 demos and it was COVID.
Yeah.
And I was going to lean into all of the trepidation and the darkness and the doubts and the roller coaster of emotions that we were all feeling in parallel in different ways. But I wrote all the songs on different instruments, so even the bare bones of the songs all started in very different places. And I just knew that it was going to be a very emotional, a very dramatic record before I added anything to it.
Do you ever do like a gut check with friends or with your partner to sort of like bounce your feeling about a subject off of them to see if it's kind of like a collective feeling?
Absolutely. I mean, I write from a really personal place. And, even before quarantine, I wanted to make sure that after I write personal songs, that they feel universal in a way where anyone can connect to them on their own level. So, I check myself there before I share it with anyone else. And I will say about 90% of what I write, no one's ears hear them because I always write from a personal place and it starts there without ever thinking that it's going to be for anyone else. So that's my first filter. Second filter is my partner, who is also my manager. And he also used to play drums with me. So he has a musician's ear, as well as thinking of all of my albums collectively and what the trajectory of my sound has been or will be, or what kind of twists and turns are interesting just as a friend. But he listens to the content sometimes and asks me like where I'm going, how dark is this? Mm-hmm. There's even been a song on the record where he thought I was singing too low. He's like, it sounds uncomfortably low. And I was like, I want people to be uncomfortably low with me.
So what other types of feedback does he give you? Like specifically when looking at the story of all of your albums together?
Sometimes he'll comment on the tempo of my songs and say they could be bumped up a couple, BPMs or whatever, because my songs tend to be very mid-tempo. I think I've honed in my mid-tempo ballad for sure. And so he'll check me on trying to give some tempo to the records and not laughing at myself when a song is too lighthearted. Because I'm like, with Mistakes, I thought, is this one too silly to include, because it's about me being a bad dancer. But he thought, he's like, this is the, as we start talking about sequencing of the record, and this is a point in the record where that song comes in, we actually really need that one song. And it took us a long time to get there, but we did. And I found the confidence to sing something that lighthearted in the context of the weight of the whole album.
I wanted to ask you about Home to Me. I believe it's a song about your son, but I just wanted to hear how it came to you and what you were thinking when you wrote it.
Home to Me is definitely about my son. I have peppered in a couple of secret messages to him for when he's old enough to know better. He's 5. And he's only just starting to understand what I do. And it's interesting as he starts asking, how many movies does it take to get to the city where you're going to go? It's all like the increments are all about how many movies can I watch on the way. You can watch The Sandlot 4 times. But, it's in the middle of the pandemic and writing a new record. I mean, it's very surreal to even imagine going on tour again.
Yeah.
I wasn't even sure if it would happen. Quite frankly, I'm scared to go back out, but I'm going to do it because that's what I'm supposed to do. And that, because things are normal now, right?
So they say.
But, I'm envisioning myself being on the road and my son starting school, and I'm basically apologizing because I know how hard it is. But I feel like my job is for him to grow up watching us figure it out, watching us make it work, and helping each other thrive even when it's hard. And I would not be my full self if I did not have music and my band and the fans that support it.
That's so important too. That's not a little point.
Right?
It's so important to feel like yourself after you've had a child. It's just such a big deal. And another thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about you going on stage after being home and being a mom and, wearing the pandemic clothes and whatever it is, and all of a sudden you have to step on stage with maybe makeup, or you have to do your hair and have like a cool outfit. That seems like such a big transition. And like, can you even move your body in the way you want to move it? Like, how do you get back into that mode?
Let me tell you, first of all, I got a pair of leather pants for the last tour, and I was nervous to put them back on. I was like, really? Leather pants? Why did I do this to myself? Why am I going in this rock direction? Why am I trying to be Joan Jett right now? I really I wish I could wear sweatpants on stage. We just had our first warm-up shows recently, and on one hand, it's nice to shake it off. And I'm glad that I'm, as my partner calls, elevated Sharon. You know, you're still yourself. It's just like if you were going out on the town or something. And it helps to get into this alter ego-ish in order to disconnect from that person.
Yes.
Even like practice, like I was practicing walking in heels again around the house because I've been wearing my Blundstones every day. Like, okay, well, maybe I need to see if Blundstones will collaborate with me on like a Chelsea boot because that's going to be my transition.
Yeah, I was looking at your European tour dates last night and I was just thinking about it. Like, it must be such a singular experience for you, just as a mother and as a partner, how to figure out how to balance the domestic side of life and also like show up and be on stage and be so super present to the fans. Is there anybody in your life who you can talk to about that? Like how to balance that and how to sort of like come to terms with it in your mind?
I mean, I've talked to different parents for sure. And I think what's so unique is that any rigid parent would see my career and just be like, oh yeah, your kid's never going on the road. I've never been like that in my life. But as I'm getting older, I know that I want some structure for my kid because I don't naturally have it as a musician and a Pisces, and I'm just a dreamer, and I thrive in structure even though I fight against it all the time. So I'm trying to find the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Most parents that I know that are on the road are dads, and they have a very different kind of attachment to kids. There's a separation a bit more where I feel constantly connected. And the mothers that I talk to, they have different styles, and they tend to be able to bring a nanny on tour full time, and I can't do that either. I love when my son comes out and he sees what I do. I want him to know what I do. I want him to know that I'm available. I want him to be able to visualize what my schedule is every day. So if I tell him I'm sound checking, he'll know what that means. If I tell him I'm just backstage with the guys, he knows what I'm talking about. And when he knows that I didn't sleep well through the night because of the bunk, then he'll know exactly what I'm talking about because he knows what the bunk is and he knows what backstage is, you know. But he starts kindergarten in August, and I realize that I'm going to be on tour for his first day of school and my heart's already broken, you know, but I want him to have that. So you can't have both.
Yeah. We had Michael Stipe on the show recently, and he was talking about the postpartum period after you come off of a big tour or after you finish an album. And I was curious to know, since you've actually been through postpartum, are those sort of like similar feelings when you finish a big project?
Absolutely not. I mean, yes. I mean, your soul is torn open. You like give all these songs. I mean, anyone that's gone through 34 hours of induced labor, then to be cut open, and then takes months to heal. And my son is 5 and I still feel my incision and I'm numb down there and I pee every time I laugh. I mean,
yes.
But it's intense. When you make a record, it's intense. When you go on tour and you come home, it's intense. And it's like, it's not postpartum. It's like you need a nap and you don't want to be bothered. And the things that people don't tell you, the healing process is different. And with touring, it's like you come home and you're exhausted. The physical aspect is real.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Growing up in Jersey, do you remember like the first artist or the first piece of music that you really connected to?
The first song I ever fell in love with was Unchained Melody. I just thought it was one of the most beautiful songs ever written. I still do. But the first thing I sought out on my own was Elastica. I found it at a Sam Goody in the mall. And I remember that I wanted to be them so bad. I was like, they look so cool. It was like the connection.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know a lot of female rock musicians that were modern, but that kind of opened up this whole other gate as soon as my schoolmates were here. Like, we were trading Walkman and sharing the cassettes we were listening to. And I was like, oh, Sonic Youth, cool. Nirvana, cool. Liz Phair, cool. But that was kind of my my gateway into getting into with the cool kids, because I listened to a lot of classic music leading up to that.
So were you listening to stuff that your brothers and sisters were hearing, or what was music like in your house?
It was all over the place. So I was one of 5 kids, and my dad had the vinyl collection that he had since he was a kid. So it was a lot of 60s, 70s rock. His favorite band is Jethro Tull, and he was listening to music constantly in the car, but it was Jethro Tull, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, the Kings, Mott the Hoople, and then my older brother, who was super into that music as well, because we all listened to what my dad listened to.
Yeah.
My older brother gave me his box of tapes when he left for college as a going away present, and it was like Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, Gin Blossoms, Soul Asylum. My mom was like folk. She likes Joni Mitchell and Melanie, and she got me into Mary Chapin and Lucinda Williams. So like I feel like I'm inspired by so much that I get confused.
Yeah. Was the house loud? Like, was there always music playing? Like, what was the regular vibe in the house?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my dad was blasting records downstairs, and then when there wasn't music going on in the basement, then the drums were probably being played, or my brother and his friends were probably jamming. And like with road trips, especially when there's like 7 of us in a car, when we drove my brother cross country to go to Arizona State, we were in my parents' green minivan, and we have one of those Macs on the top of the car, and the whole like. There's certain things that I'll still remember from this road trip is that we all had our Walkman and Nutri-Grain bars. I will never be able to eat one again in my life because I smell them forever. Or a Yoo-Hoo.
Did that prepare you at all for going on tour, especially early tours? Just like being packed into a car with your family, or just living in a house with a lot of things going on? Like, I'm sure at times it was chaotic. Like, did that prepare you for that life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was raised as a camper, and you learn how to share space and not to take up a lot of space. And I also learned to be like a listener and not a talker, although I'm talking a lot right now. But I'm a better listener than a talker. I'm kind of indecisive because there were so many of us that I let everyone else make the decision, because if I was another opinion in the mix, it stressed me out too much. And so I would just kind of let everyone else decide and deal with it, because I didn't really care. I just learned to not care.
So when did you start actually playing? When did you start picking up instruments, and what did you play first?
Instruments were encouraged at a really young age. I remember when I moved in about, I think, kindergarten, and it was like a fixer-upper Victorian house where I first lived in Nutley, New Jersey. But the people that moved didn't want to take their grand piano, and it was like this old grand piano, and everyone was like, it was chaotic with everybody like moving in, and like the kids claiming their rooms or whatever. But like I was too young to know. And I guess I got lost in the shuffle, or I couldn't find anybody. My mom was looking for me. I guess, I was wandering around, and then she heard me, and I was under the piano crying. And she said that ever since that day, I gravitated towards that piano, and I started just like hearing notes and humming along to it. And she's like, you always played it. And then I think by the time I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, I got lessons. And I got piano lessons early on, and then I got Suzuki violin lessons through my local elementary school.
Nice.
And then in the middle of my 6th grade year, we moved, and there wasn't really like a music scene there. And so it wasn't until high school that I tried to go back into the music world, and then I did choir. And when I went into high school is when my brother left for college, and he left me his guitar. And I started playing guitar, and I was learning how to sing properly. And before that, I was only singing in church. We used to go every Sunday. I wasn't really religious, but I loved messing with everyone in the room, because they'd only sing the melody, and I'd be the only one in the whole room singing a harmony. But I like challenging myself to like learn harmonies that way. And by the time I was in choir, I kind of found my niche. That's when the guitar and the singing started.
Was there a point when you decided maybe around, high school, late high school or early college age that you wanted to try and take a crack at music full time? Or was it always sort of a hobby at that point?
It was a hobby for sure. In high school, I used to write more silly songs with an older friend of mine. Her name was Dana. And we would sit on the main street and just write about what we saw. Like a gangster in the corner with his pants blowing in the wind, and this green canoe that sat on the main street that we're like, one day we're going to save up enough money to buy this green canoe. But very like Ween-like songs.
Oh, I love Ween.
Yeah, and they were like a big, they lived close to where we were from.
They're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
New Hope?
Yeah. So like I used to play on the corners of Lambertville and New Hope, and when I moved in the middle of my 6th grade year, we moved to a town closer to Pennsylvania, and Lambertville, New Hope had like the open mics that I would go to later in life. But yeah, I mean, I didn't take it seriously, but I knew that was the only thing I ever cared about was music. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. But my parents, when we talked about what I was going to do for a job one day, and I was like, I want to do music. They're like, but what about it? They say after high school, I have to go to college. So what do I want to do in college? And there wasn't like, if I could have a year off to figure it out or anything. It was just not an option at that time. In the 90s, it wasn't really discussed. I don't feel like it was the natural thing to do. You can do it, so let's do it. And they wanted me to have a backup plan.
Yeah.
I through a kid that was a year ahead of me in choir, actually, and in theater, which I also did musicals and theater. He went to a recording school in Middle Tennessee in Murfreesboro. He said, you should check out Middle Tennessee. It's pretty cool. There's a good recording program, and it's in the fastest growing city in the South. So they said. It was before East Nashville popped up at all. So I moved there in 99. It was the only school I applied to. And I didn't get past the general studies classes because I had this illusion that I could finally go to school for music and I'd be taking music classes. But the whole first year was spent doing science and math and
like the prereqs.
English. But I was like, I got like straight A's in high school, and now I have to do this all over again. And I was so mad that I stopped going.
Yeah.
And I got a job at a venue. And that's when I started writing songs for real. But I didn't think I could do it full time until my 20s, when I left Tennessee with my tail between my legs after I had a bad relationship. Moved back in with my parents for a year to save money. And then after that year, I moved to New York in about 2004, 2005, and really, really gave it my first go with the songs that I had written in the past.
Do you remember some of those early performances? And were you just sort of like closing your eyes and going inside, or were you able to be aware of yourself in the situation?
I used to hide behind my bangs, and I always had short cuts because whenever I got stressed out, I would cut my hair. And I would always have the weirdest haircuts because I cut it myself, especially the back, but the front was always long. And so I would do this thing where I would perform and hide behind my hair so I didn't have to look at people. And I used to just drink a little bit too much whiskey and go to open mics and tell people that I only wanted to write music to make people cry.
Yeah.
But I was like so shy, but I was also a shit talker. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know, like I was driven to play and I had no idea why. I didn't have enough distance from the songs to realize how intense they were. And I would do this like weird thing in between where people weren't sure if I was doing stand-up, if this was like performance art, or if I actually was playing real songs. Like they were so lost. But when I started, singing more and talking less and, making less jokes, I think the music made more sense.
I was thinking about you growing up in Jersey. Is there any sort of connective tissue that you feel between you, Patti Smith, and Springsteen? Like, is there anything there? Like, is there any commonality?
I grew up listening to Bruce Springsteen, and as an adult, I found Patti. And I think when I finally learned how to have a band, they had a baby. I mean, that's my only thing. I appreciate them both for different reasons. Bruce was such a neighbor, a friend, not my neighbor, but you know what I mean. I feel like everyone from Jersey, I still remember this kid in elementary school who swore that was his uncle or his cousin or something. And I wanted to believe it so bad just because his last name was Springsteen. But, I feel like everyone from New Jersey feels this camaraderie with Bruce Springsteen because he just talks about growing up in a small town and like working class, blue collar, like stories that nobody tells. And that's a lot of Jersey. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't understand or come into Patti Smith's music until I lived a life a bit to be able to connect with her trauma and with her path in life and living in New York. New York to me embodies Patti Smith so much. Mm-hmm. And even in the places that I lived, I felt like I was circling her past lives. And, it made me think differently about how I phrased things and what it was I wanted to share versus how can I use things to symbolize versus speak so directly so that, again, more people can connect with it in their own way versus just telling them exactly how I felt. And I'm still learning how to do that, and I still aspire to learn how to write in a more poetic way as she does.
Yeah, I mean, I feel there's a certain amount of grit between the three of you. Like, that might be a commonality.
The way they engage with the audience, too, is something that I want to learn how to do better. I'm learning how to put instruments down. That there's just part of me as a musician that I'm like, I still play. I play guitar. I play keys. I played a lot on this record. But I think in a live setting, as I'm learning to let go of the instrument, I'm actually a better performer. When I'm not multitasking, if I can just sing. But I'm a little territorial where I'm like, Charlie, I don't want you to play my guitar part. Can you play the piano instead? But it actually doesn't help the situation most of the time. I just have to let go and be a singer. But it's such a hard thing to do after being my own band for so long,
Yeah. Do you ever get hung up about what you do on stage, like physically, if you don't have an instrument?
Well, yeah, what do I do with my hands? Sure. I mean,
right.
I realize I'm a pointer. I'm like pointing so much, I'm like, what would Elaine do? I'm like such a Jersey girl. I'm just pointing at everyone. And then I look back and I'm like, remember, people are just going to mirror that. If you're pointing at everyone, they're just going to point right back to you. And then all of a sudden, like, you have an audience that's all pointing at me. And I'm like, maybe I need to figure out more signs. But yeah, I'm still figuring out that part of it. But it's fun to like walk around stage and mess with my bandmates and interact with them in other ways. But I need to watch a lot more performance videos to be inspired about what that is. But I also want to find it on my own without completely ripping people.
Patti's a really crazy performer. She's really good.
She's so wonderful. I gotten to see her twice at Bowery for New Year's before she stopped doing the New Year's shows. I remember where she was having a night and she kind of stopped the show and was just talking for a while and saying that, she doesn't know why, but it was one of those days where she woke up and she's like, today's just not my day. Having a bad day. Nothing happened, but I'm having a bad day. And doesn't that just piss you off? She's just talking about how she's like, I'm just trying to shake this thing off. I don't know what it is, but it's this thing and I've been feeling it all day. And the whole audience just started like connecting with her. And like, It was like, the do you believe in fairies kind of feeling where all of a sudden like the energy of the crowd gave her confidence back.
Yep.
And she went right into pissing in a river. And I lost my mind. It was one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. I think that was 2010.
So she's an expert vamper, which Springsteen is too. So there's another connection.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I got to learn on that.
Yeah.
The power of the vamp. Yeah. Like, guys, this is where you can vamp. You wait on me to do some kind of thing. You have to learn how to be able to speak, right, at a certain point and engage with the audience and yes, be able to get another emotion besides the emotion of the songs that you're giving so that you can show them a bit about who you are.
Yeah.
And sometimes shit happens on stage that's funny, and sometimes you need to communicate it. Sometimes I try to engage with the people in the audience, and you never know what's going to come from there. But, it's uncomfortable sometimes when it's only song, and you don't ever try to connect with them in another way.
In Darkness Fades, it sounds like you're using your voice in a new way. It's like you're able to harness more power in your vocals. And is that something that's coming from your chest, or is it more of like from your head? Like, where is that coming from, and how did you prepare yourself to do that?
I was harnessing my inner choir girl. And, it comes up through my boots, but it probably sits in my, in my abs and my chest somewhere, my diaphragm. But I took some vocal lessons from this woman in New York, Joy Askew, who used to sing a lot with Peter Gabriel and Laurie Anderson.
Oh, wow.
And so she was a trained rock singer who doesn't judge you based on like how you sing, how you look, what your lifestyle is. She teaches you exercises and how to relax like your throat, your jaw, your tongue, and how to project your voice in a different way by the shapes you can make with your mouth.
Wow.
And so you have to do a lot of visualizing when you open yourself up like that, and imagine like your body as a straw and just allowing air to go through. It's a lot easier said than done. But yeah, when I first wrote that melody, I didn't know it was going to come out, and I felt like I was controlling so much grief. And the only way I could get it out was pretending like I was in choir and singing it in this proper way almost. I had to posture and stand and close my eyes and just visualize that I was singing in that way.
Have you seen a difference in the way that you sing after taking the vocal lessons and doing the visualizations?
I mean, it's something I have to keep up, but I'll bring the exercises on tour because it's also maintenance. It's muscle memory of even how you talk. So like if I was trying to save my voice, I would talk more like this. And it's the way that you aim the air at the roof of your mouth, so you're tricking your throat into not receiving air through your vocal cords.
Oh.
But how I really talk, it all sits right here. And that's the rasp. But if I speak like this, it's very different. But I can't do that without laughing.
Yeah.
These are some of the hardest songs as a singer to perform. And I just had 4 shows in a row, and I've had 2 days off, and I could just feel it, in my throat. I'm like, I need to practice more. I'm so like vocally out of shape, and they are very demanding songs, not just in intensity in the performance, but also the range is insane. I don't know why I did this to myself.
Yes. Okay, I just want to ask you about a couple more songs, if that's okay.
Of course.
Can you tell me about the story about Every Time the Sun Comes Up?
I know, it's a line I'm probably going to regret the rest of my life. But we're having a late night, and it was a song that I hadn't finished, and we were ahead of schedule in the studio, and we had time to work on one more. And the band was encouraging me to finish it because they were like, this is going to be a classic song. It's so Bruce Springsteen. And I was like, well, I don't know, like my lyrics aren't done. And they're like, why don't you just take a break, have like a drink and a smoke and come back? And like, well, I'll play the song live and you can just freestyle lyrics. We won't keep anything. And then we can at least get the band music done. And then you can work on the lyrics another time. You can work on the vocals another time because we'll be recording in separate rooms or whatever. And while I was having a drink with the band, like I literally, I broke Stuart Lerman, who produced the record with me. I like broke one of his glasses and like I cleaned it up, and like you had to do the dishes in the bathroom in the studio that we were at. So it was called like Hobo Sound, and it was an amazing studio that was just through the Lincoln Tunnel in Weehawken, New Jersey. And I would take the bus there from the Port Authority, and it was an amazing setup. It was just exactly what I needed. It wasn't too much. It wasn't too little. It was just enough for what I needed at that time. And the funny thing was, where you did the dishes, it was in the bathroom, and I was just a little stoned, and I thought it was really funny that I was like doing the dishes after I went to the bathroom. And so I came back into the studio and like the band's all ready for me to go. And I'm thinking this isn't a keep or take. And so I'm just singing stream of consciously in the place of like just the band's playing live together and I'm just doing these vocals. And I'm like, I'm not worried because they're not going to keep it. But they kept it and they said, I don't think you need to rewrite any of this. And I was like, oh man, okay. I'm probably going to regret this later. But I was just kind of documenting what happened, but like taking out of context, it seems kind of random. But
I mean, that song gets stuck in my head like no other.
Oh, thanks.
Also, I was reading about you've been studying psychology on and off, and it sounds like you've really wanted to, at a certain point, I think around 2015, you wanted to take a break from music and you started to go back to school, but then you got the job on the OA. And it sounds like things have just been sort of like building and building, but that desire is still there to finish your psychology degree and possibly pursue that in some way or another. Is that something that you're still thinking about now?
Absolutely. I've actually, I never finished my undergrad, but I'm 2 classes away from being able to transfer to a university. I just have to hit these damn general studies classes.
Yes.
I just need 1 science and 1 statistics class, and I can transfer to the psychology program in a university in California. But I can't wait to get past the general studies classes so I can figure out what it is that I most connect with, because I'm sure once I start digging into the more specific classes in psychology that I'll be able to focus on what it is I want to do, because I don't know if it's the social work aspect or if it's working out of a university and connecting with younger kids as they transition from their homes, or if it's one-on-one therapy in like my own practice, or if it's being a consultant in some kind of way. I'm not sure, but yeah, I just want to help people learn how to talk about their emotions because it's the only thing I've had that's been consistent in my life and learning how to hone, and it's helped me a lot. So we'll see where it goes.
Maybe it was in the new Pitchfork profile on you that you said maybe when you're 50, you'll slow down with the creative side of things and focus more on building a psychology practice or figuring out what that is. But it also seems like you have so much creative ambition still, and there's so much that you're still doing, and there's definitely more music. So do you think that's something that'll actually ever happen?
I mean, my goal is to have a degree by the time I'm 50. I'm 41. I think that's a realistic goal, while chipping away at this degree while also still working on music, because that is something that I feel like I will always do. I don't know where these other interests will take me. I'm just, I'm interested in a lot of things, but I think if I set goals for myself, that they will be realistic. And, once I say, okay, I'm going to go to school for this, I'll focus on that for a semester or 2, depending on what the program looks like. I'll say, okay, then I'm going to dedicate a year to this, and we'll see where this leads. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I think it's healthy to learn how to pivot. And as we get older, I think it's healthy to not depend on one thing to sustain ourselves. And again, I want my son to grow up thinking that anything is possible. So for me to be able to pivot from being on the road all the time to finding work that doesn't mean that I have to be absent, then I'm all for it.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was so fun talking to you, and I wish you huge, huge luck on the tour. You're going to kill it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Leah. It was really nice getting to talk with you. I appreciate you taking the time. It was really, really fun.
Thanks to Sharon Van Etten for giving us insight into the making of her new album, We've Been Going About This All Wrong. To hear our favorite Sharon Van Etten songs, check out the playlist at brokenrecordpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Broken Record. Broken Record is produced with help from Leah Rose, Jason Gambrell, Brent Holliday, Eric Sandler, and Jennifer Sanchez, with engineering help from Nick Chafee. Our executive producer is Mia Lobel. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like the show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.